Hey guys, today we step quietly into the thick, humming forests of Mauritius, some 400 years ago, before the ships arrived, before the maps, and long before anyone had ever heard the word dodo. You're not here to laugh at this bird. Not tonight. You're here to walk the sand with it, to listen closely, and to discover why its strange, oversized beak may have once held secrets lost to time. There's a warm scent of guava in the air, thick as honey, and somewhere off to the left, a flock of echo parrots shriek and flutter out of the canopy. But you're crouched low now, behind a rock that's warm to the touch, watching a creature most people believe was awkward and dumb. Except, it's not. It waddles, yes, but with a certain rhythm, like it's done this 1,000 times. And that curved beak. It catches the sunlight like polished ivory. It's not pecking fruit. It's scraping at bark, nudging the soil, trying something different. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Post your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where you all are watching from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The dodo you're watching is about 3 feet tall. Bigger than a turkey, much rounder than a pigeon, and yes, it looks kind of like someone tried to build a goose from memory after a long nap. But that's just your brain trying to label something it wasn't ready for. Because here's the thing, that beak. That glorious, slightly ridiculous, downward-hooked beak. It's not shaped for comedy, it's shaped for purpose. You watch as the dodo nudges a rock aside. Underneath, it finds a seed pod, tough as an old coconut. Other birds would move on. The dodo gives it a curious glance, tilts its head like it's considering the stock market, then strikes. That beak comes down with a sudden precision, a crack, and the pod splits. Inside, a sweet, resinous core, something rich in calories. Evolution doesn't hand out gifts like that for no reason. Scientists used to believe the dodo only ate soft fruit. But new studies of gizzard stones, those little pebbles birds swallow to grind food, reveal something odd, traces of hard nuts, crusty shells, even charcoal. Did it eat burned wood? Or maybe something inside the char? Still debated. Still strange. Then there's the tongue. Fossil records are murky, but some reconstructions suggest the dodo had a surprisingly muscular tongue, good for pulling, tearing, or maybe scraping algae off bark. Or lichen off rocks. Ever tried that with a soft little beak? You wouldn't last a week out here. And while we're here, let's get this out of the way. You'd never survive on this island. Not barefoot, not without bug spray. Mosquitoes hum like tiny warplanes. The sun. It's a full-body oven. And you'd probably try to hug the dodo. Bad idea. You smell like foreign pathogens. You step over a root and notice another dodo not far away. This one smaller, more curious. Juvenile, maybe. It's testing its beak against a log, tapping in a slow rhythm, like it's listening for something beneath. A bug? A grub? Some say dodos may have used their beaks like primitive hammers. Not just for eating, but for exploration, even communication. Think woodpecker, minus the neck spasms. But here's where it gets really fun. There's a theory, quirky, unconfirmed, and still argued over, that the dodo's beak might have been used to signal. Not like Morse code or jazz solos, but soft taps and clicks during courtship. After all, when you're a flightless bird surrounded by rustling leaves, how else do you get someone's attention? The beak becomes less of a joke now, doesn't it? It's part Swiss Army knife, part percussion instrument, part survival tool. And when you watch the bird move, testing, scraping, tapping, you realize something. This beak wasn't just built to eat fruit. It was built for a world we've only just started to understand. Here's a mystery for you. Scientists still debate whether the dodo's beak was strong enough to act as a proper weapon. Some say yes, that it could defend itself against rival dodos during mating season. Others argue no, pointing to its lack of natural predators and generally chill lifestyle. The truth might lie in between, a beak that could deliver a message without drawing blood. Oh, and speaking of messages, quick callback. Remember that juvenile? It's following you now. Sort of. Keeping a healthy distance, eyeing you like you're a new kind of tree. It pecks the ground once, then trots off into the underbrush, where the real secrets live. Before we move on, one final oddity. Some early ship logs describe the dodo not as sluggish, but as curious and surprisingly bold. One account even claimed a dodo tried to walk into a Dutch sailor's tent, nose first, as if inspecting the decor. That beak may not have been meant for battle, but for understanding, exploring, and maybe even mischief. And in this gentle dusk, with the shadows long and the leaves glowing from beneath, you begin to suspect something. We never really knew this bird. We only knew the ghost of it. And that beak, that glorious, weird, misunderstood beak, might be our only clue to who the dodo really was. You step deeper into the forest now, where the underbrush thickens and the sounds grow stranger. Everything buzzes, clicks, or hums, like the island itself is whispering in tongues you've never heard. But the dodo, it strolls calmly through it all, utterly unfazed. That's because, here on Mauritius, there are no lions, no crocodiles, no hawks circling overhead, no lurking cats in the trees. Nothing, really, that wants to eat a dodo. Welcome to an island with no fear. The world here formed from volcanic fire, cooled by ocean breezes, and bloomed in glorious isolation. Mauritius is like a forgotten corner of the planet's attic, where evolution just did its own thing. The plants grow weird. The animals grow weirder. And without predators to keep things in check, some creatures let go of all caution. Wings. Useless. Camouflage. Who cares? Speed. What for? And that's how you get a creature like the dodo. It's the sort of bird evolution sculpts when no one's watching. Big, bulky, flightless, but not lazy. Just confident. You don't rush through paradise when nothing's chasing you. As you follow one dodo, you begin to notice others in the distance. A small group browsing under a clump of palm fronds. They grunt and coo, almost pig-like in sound. There's something peaceful about it, like you're watching old neighbors tending a community garden. Here's a fun twist. For a long time, scientists assumed dodos were solitary. But new theories, backed by mass bone deposits, suggest otherwise. Some researchers believe they lived in flocks. Not just a few individuals bumping into each other, but large, semi-organized groups, perhaps with social hierarchies and routines. Suddenly, that odd beak might take on new meaning. In a group setting, beaks become more than food tools. They become communication devices, signals, social cues, maybe even fashion statements. Who had the sharpest curve, the most striking profile? But don't get too romantic. The ecosystem here is fragile, like a glass sculpture balanced on a breeze. Here's your scientific fact for this walk. Mauritius was once home to at least 26 species of land birds. Most were endemic, meaning they live nowhere else on Earth. Today, more than half of them are extinct. The ones that survive cling to the island's few remaining forest patches like secrets no one wants to forget. And the dodo. It was the biggest of them all. A kind of ground anchor for the entire system. A seed spreader. A slow-moving forest janitor. A bird that helps shape the very woods you're walking through. That beak may have cracked open palm nuts, or scattered rare ebony tree seeds. Some ecologists think the disappearance of the dodo might have triggered a quiet domino effect. Fewer seeds spread, fewer trees grown, less food for other species. A gap in the ecological chain that's still echoing. And just when you start feeling bad for the bird, it does something unexpected. It flaps its stubby wings, not to fly, of course, but to startle a large beetle from under a fern. Then it pecks, scoops it up, and swallows with a decisive gulp. So maybe it wasn't just a fruit eater after all. In fact, the idea of the dodo as strictly vegetarian is now being challenged. Some studies suggest it was opportunistic, eating insects, crustaceans, maybe even baby reptiles. The beak, again, becomes the key, wide enough to scoop, strong enough to crunch. You hear a low rumble overhead. A sudden cloudburst, maybe. Mauritius weather shifts like a distracted storyteller. Sun 1 second, downpour the next. You duck under a canopy of giant ferns, sharing space with a trio of dodos who don't even acknowledge you. Your background noise. And for a moment, you feel lucky. This isn't their world made for you. It's your world that forgot them. Let's pause here for a quirky little note. Some of the earliest Dutch sailors who landed on Mauritius brought pigs with them. Why? For food, mostly. But pigs are great at rooting through underbrush and worse at respecting anyone else's nest. One theory says that the first real threat to dodo eggs wasn't man with a spear, but pig with a snout. The dodo, you realize, evolved for a world without predators. So its eggs, just placed on the ground. No trees. No cliffs. Just a tidy little mound in the leaf litter. If you're thinking, wow, that seems like a really bad idea, you're not alone. Scientists still debate whether the dodo laid only one egg at a time. If true, that makes their population growth glacial. One broken egg, one stolen chick, and that's a whole season's investment gone. No wonder they didn't last long once the intruder showed up. Still, back here in this brief pocket of the past, you watch a dodo pluck at a bright orange fruit, twist it with its beak, and let the pulp drop to the ground. Another dodo waddles over and eats that. Sharing? Maybe. Laziness? Possibly. Symbiosis? Entirely plausible. That's the beauty of this world. No sharp edges, no predators, no reason not to let the fruit rot a little before you dine. And in the drifting mist that rolls in after the rain, the dodos start to hum again. Not real humming, of course. Just that soft, resonant cooing, low and rhythmic, like jumble jazz. You're not sure if it's communication, courtship, or just contentment. But as the sound blends with the patter of water and the distant ocean breeze, you feel it, the warm, soft piece of a world that once didn't know fear. The forest begins to thin, sunlight slicing through the canopy in golden slants. You follow a worn trail, barely more than a flattened path between vines and volcanic stone. The dodos walk ahead, unhurried. They seem to know the way. Eventually, you emerge into a glade, and this is where things shift. Here, the plants are weirder. You spot a tree with twisted, spiraled roots like it's grown in a whirlpool. A spiky fruit dangles from another that looks like it could double as a medieval weapon. And in the middle of it all, a patch of strange, bright purple ground shrubs. The dodos approach them eagerly, pecking and sniffing, and then one scoops a whole handful of the leaves into its beak. And that's when it hits you. This isn't just eating. This looks like behavior. The beak, the famously curved, oversized tool, moves with careful control. Not just gobbling, but selecting. Picking leaves from the middle. Rolling them slightly before swallowing. It's not proof, but it's suggestive. Maybe these birds understood more than we give them credit for. You crouch beside a stone, watching. A younger dodo, a juvenile, by the look of its slimmer build and less gnarled beak, tries to copy the older one's movement. It botches the roll. Gets a mouthful of stem. Spits it out with a funny little shake that looks suspiciously like embarrassment. You smile. This might just be one of your 3 humorous moments, because let's face it, watching a dodo awkwardly fail at a snack is charming. You feel like you're watching a prehistoric cooking show blooper reel. Here's your mainstream science moment for this stretch. Studies of the dodo's skull and jaw suggest an impressive degree of strength and dexterity. One 3D reconstruction found the bird's beak could exert significant pressure, strong enough to crush hard-shelled fruits, maybe even small land crabs or mollusks. But the skull also shows an unusually large nasal cavity, and a curved jawline that hints at fine motor control, an odd combination for a flightless island grazer. Which brings us to a quirky theory. What if the dodo's beak evolved from multiple uses? Yes, eating, but also nest building, mating displays, and maybe even signaling others from a distance. Imagine a sound made not from vocal cords, but from snapping that heavy beak shut with a clap. Woodpecker style, only louder. The dodo as a percussionist in its forest band. No recordings, of course. No written descriptions mention this. But you watch one of the older birds tilt its head upward and give a sudden crack of its beak. The rest glance over. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe you just witnessed a lost language. Let's dig into a quiet mystery now. Some believe the dodo's beak coloration changed with age or mood. Not brightly like a toucan, but subtly, muted shifts in hue or sheen. A way to telegraph maturity. Or readiness to mate. Or even distress. Unfortunately, no one ever described the live bird's colors in detail. What you see in museums today. Guesses. Often based on dead specimens, paintings made from memory, or artistic license. One artist drew them brown and dull. Another, soft gray with a blush of green. One sailor claimed the beak was yellow at the base, fading to black at the tip. Was it? Who knows? That's the open debate. What color was the dodo, really? Some modern reconstructions make it drab. Others more vibrant. But the truth probably lies somewhere between camouflage and charisma, a blend made from Mauritius's filtered light and leafy shadows. Another humorous moment finds you here. A dodo tries to pluck a fruit hanging just out of reach. It stretches, lurches, hops, sort of. Its feet lift like a kid trying to reach the cookie jar. Then it flops down with a grunt, utterly defeated. Seconds later, another dodo just walks up and knocks the fruit down without drama. Yeah. Definitely a social dynamic going on here. And then, as you sit quietly, something truly odd occurs. A dodo walks straight toward you. You freeze. It doesn't see you as a threat. Why would it? You're part of the scenery here. It stops inches from your foot, lowers its head, and starts scratching at the ground with that beak. Not random pecking, more like purposeful excavation. It digs until it hits a patch of soft soil, then probes with the tip, churning over leaves. Buried fruit. Insects. A specific kind of mushroom. You lean closer. And you remember, dodo gizzards were found with grit and small stones inside. They may have needed them to help grind tough food, like modern birds do. But some think the dodo also dug for food underground, roots, tubers, perhaps even low-lying fungi. So maybe the beak wasn't just for snipping and crunching. Maybe it was a shovel, too. That idea lingers as the dodo moves on. You hear its slow, deliberate steps fade into the brush. From this spot, the forest opens up again. You spot an overgrown clearing filled with large, tangled vines and shattered palm trunks. The remains of a tropical storm, perhaps. Or something older. And right in the middle, a stone slab. Not natural. Carved. Weather-worn. You approach, brush the moss aside. It's Dutch. An old inscription. Faint, eroded, but legible. It marks the arrival of the first European ships. A date from the 1600s. And next to it, a rough engraving of a bird. Not noble. Not majestic. More like a crude sketch of a fat chicken. The first outside record of the dodo. Reduced to a cartoon. And here's where the story gets bittersweet. Because from this point forward, everything changes. The moment humans etched their presence here, the countdown began. They brought pigs, rats, monkeys, fire, axes. And with them came the end of a world that had never known fear. But let's not go there yet. There's still time. Still light in the trees. Still a faint cooing on the breeze. The dodos are calling. The trail deepens again, leading you beneath a canopy woven so tightly with leaves and vines that the light turns green. Dappled. Dreamlike. You move slowly now, partly because the path is narrow, but mostly because something about this space demands reverence. You notice them before you hear them. Clusters of dodos, some perched awkwardly on logs, others nestled into shallow beds of leaves. Their feathers puff slightly with each breath. The forest is unusually still. No wind. No buzzing insects. Just the occasional rustle of wings and a distant, low croon. Then, a flash of movement. Two dodos face off in a slow-motion dance. One lunges forward, beak angled high. The other sidesteps, barely a move, more like a lean, and answers with a thumping of its feet. The first responds by ruffling its feathers dramatically, making itself look almost twice its normal size. You squat low behind a rock, watching the whole strange exchange. And here comes your mainstream science moment. Male dodos likely competed for mates through body displays, not violent fights. Their wings, while useless for flight, may have served as visual cues. And those oversized beaks? Possibly tools of posturing, not combat. More, look at this jawline, then watch me bite. The two dodos square off again. They don't touch. Don't peck. Just bob and puff and stomp in a rhythm so exaggerated it borders on comedic. And suddenly, you can't help but imagine them as prehistoric ballroom dancers, if ballroom dancing involved feathers and mild confusion. There's your first laugh for this section. But what's really happening here? You suspect this isn't aggression. It's something older. A ritual. A social performance. Scientists still debate the extent of the dodo's social structure. Were they loosely connected flocks, or did they form tight, organized groups with dominant individuals and internal hierarchies? It's one of those delicious, unanswerable mysteries. No written account ever describes dodo society in detail. And all the clues we have, nest sites, bone clusters, indirect behavior, are fuzzy at best. Still, there's a theory. A quirky one. Some researchers believe that the dodo's beak evolved not just as a feeding tool or visual signal, but as an emotional instrument. Think about that. Not sound, not color, but shape, an expressive mask that flexed and shifted slightly depending on stress, excitement, or even curiosity. Is it plausible? Maybe. Maybe not. But as you watch one bird tilt its head inquisitively at a shiny beetle, then softly clack its beak twice before turning away, you wonder. And then comes one of those subtly funny moments. A young dodo tries to join the dance of the older two. It struts in a bit too eagerly, flaps its wings wildly, and trips over its own feet. It lands in a pile of leaves with a thwomp, its legs sticking out like a toy bird knocked over by a breeze. One of the others glances down, unimpressed. Lesson learned. You move again, deeper into the glade. And suddenly, you find yourself among nests. Dozens of them. Simple, circular beds of twigs and ferns, built low to the ground. Some are empty. Others hold pale, oblong eggs, roughly the size of grapefruits. Fragile looking, despite their size. You crouch beside one and see a faint crack on the surface. Not broken, just developing. You blink. The dodos are breeding. That changes everything. Now, this might surprise you. The idea that dodos bred year-round is still debated. Some scientists think they followed seasonal cycles linked to Mauritius's unique weather. Wet, dry, storm, dry again. Others believe they reproduced whenever food was abundant. And here's a quiet, speculative detail. The dodo may have synchronized its breeding with the falling of certain fruiting trees. A boom of food. A boom of chicks. A strategy designed by isolation. But that strategy had a weakness. Because when fruit trees were cut down, and they were, there was no signal. No cue. Just silence. And in that silence, the chicks stopped coming. You lean back on your hands, staring up at the tree canopy. Somewhere above, a thick-fingered palm sways slightly, casting patterns on the forest floor. You wonder how many generations of dodos nested here. How many courtship dances began under these leaves? How many pairs formed, raised a chick, then faded quietly into the forest again? Then, a memory floats back. Remember the juvenile from earlier? The one who couldn't quite roll the purple leaf right. You spot it again now, awkwardly standing near an adult and imitating every movement with half the confidence and twice the energy. It picks up a stick, drops it, picks it up again, points it at a rock like it's issuing a challenge, then turns to you. For a second, you lock eyes. The bird tilts its head. You swear it recognizes you. And in that moment, you're struck by a deep, quiet thought. What if intelligence isn't about solving puzzles or building tools? What if it's about curiosity? Learning by watching. Practicing. Failing. Trying again. That's what you see in the dodo now. Not a dumb bird, but a cautious, playful, oddly endearing being with a gentle presence and an unseen mind. That's your second humor beat. Because let's be real, the idea of a dodo waving a stick like a tiny wizard in training. Hilarious. But also a little profound. The sun begins to dip low, casting longer shadows through the glade. The nests glow gold. A few adult dodos gather near the edges, forming a loose semicircle like sentinels at the edge of their tiny civilization. You rise, brushing leaves from your palms. It's time to move on. But as you walk away, you hear a soft noise behind you. A single clack of beak against bark. You turn. The juvenile is watching you go. Then it returns to its nest, curls into a feathery ball, and disappears into the ferns. You step beyond the nesting glade, and the forest suddenly shifts again. The canopy lowers. The ground underfoot grows softer, peaty, springy with decay. And the air changes. It's cooler here, tinged with the scent of something mineral, something ancient. You wouldn't be surprised to stumble across a hot spring or the bones of something long, long dead. What you do find is a trench. A shallow gorge, really, hidden by ferns, with steep sides carved by centuries of rain. You nearly miss it, until you spot the line of disturbed leaves where something heavy recently slid down. You crouch, peer into the trench. And there it is again. The massive shadow from earlier. But this time, it's not just shadow. It's a dodo. But different. Larger. Older. Its feathers are sun-faded. Its beak, chipped and scuffed. It moves slowly but with a weight that seems deliberate, like every step is measured. This, you think, is the matriarch. Or patriarch. Or elder. Whatever word applies to a species with no written culture but a clear sense of generational wisdom. You slip down the side of the trench, careful not to snap twigs. At the bottom, the earth smells of wet stone and something sweet rotting. Fallen fruit. The dodo is nosing through them with a gentle patience. You watch for a long time, trying not to breathe too loudly. Here's your mainstream science fact. Fossil evidence suggests that dodos reached sexual maturity at around 4 to 6 years and lived roughly 10 to 20 years. But this is based on a painfully small sample size. Still, signs of bone density changes show that older individuals had different wear patterns, beak fractures, spine fusions, implying lifespans long enough for aging to matter. This bird fits the profile, old but competent, experienced. It grips a fruit, stares at it, then lets it fall. Not spoiled, selectively rejected. A simple act, but one with implications. Because here's the quirky theory. What if older dodos had roles beyond breeding? What if they serve as guides, as memory keepers of safe paths, food sources, storm shelters? Animals like elephants, crows, even orcas show this behavior. Leadership based on experience. And on a small island where survival depended on remembering where the floodwaters rose, where the cyclones hid, where the fruit bloomed first, elders might have mattered more than we think. So maybe this dodo is more than just old. Maybe it's history in feathers. Then, without warning, the bird turns and grunts. A low, rhythmic sound, like the creak of a tree in wind. You freeze. But it's not a warning. It's a call. And from the far end of the trench, you hear an answer. A second bird. Smaller. Younger. Limps slightly. The elder waits. The younger arrives. They nudge beaks. Is this greeting? Reassurance? You don't know. But it feels familiar. And that's when it happens, your next humorous moment. The elder dodo, apparently deciding you're no threat, proceeds to do the least majestic thing imaginable. It turns around, lifts its tail, and lets out the slowest, loudest bird fart you've ever heard. You stifle a laugh so hard you nearly fall backward. Dignity, meet biology. The birds move off, leaving you with the trench and a rising awareness. You're surrounded by ghost trails. Not supernatural, but real. Shallow impressions in the soil, grooves worn into roots, half-covered paths marked by years of shuffling feet. You realize these are migration corridors. Not far-flung, epic treks, but seasonal circuits. Loops between nesting grounds, feeding spots, and shelter from storms. Dodos didn't just wander. They navigated. Scientists still debate how far the dodo traveled across Mauritius. Some argue their range was limited to specific lowland forests. Others believe they roamed vast portions of the island, perhaps even venturing into higher elevations to escape flooding or heat. The open mystery. Why did they disappear from certain regions decades before they went fully extinct? Some theories blame early hunting. Others point to ecological shifts. But there's another possibility, a silent breakdown in memory. With elders gone and paths forgotten, younger birds may have lost access to crucial seasonal routes. Not because they were dumb, but because they were disconnected. And in this trench, staring at the worn earth, that theory lands hard. You climb out slowly, brushing dirt from your hands. At the top, you're met with a burst of light. The forest opens into a ridge, and below it, a breathtaking vista. The ocean, stretching wide and silver, peppered with distant black rocks and green islets. The sun hits it just right, turning everything gold. The ridge is breezy, wild with wind-twisted shrubs and grasses that bend low and shimmer like silk. You step to the edge, breath caught. And then, a sound. A deep, resonant clack. You glance left, and there, silhouetted against the sky, stands another dodo. Alone. Head high. Facing the ocean like it's remembering something. Or waiting. You approach slowly, but the bird doesn't move. It just is. And here's your third humor beat. The bird glances over its shoulder, and with impeccable comedic timing, sneezes so hard it stumbles sideways. The moment is so awkward, so relatable, you can't help but grin. Still, something about it lingers. The idea that the dodo didn't just exist in the forest, but knew the forest. That it had places it returned to, views it preferred, paths it remembered, and maybe stories it passed on without words. Below, in the distance, you see the edges of a colonial outpost, wooden fences, plumes of smoke. The future, arriving with boots and blades. But here, on this windswept ridge, the dodo still holds its ground. For now. A single feather flutters past your face. You reach for it instinctively, soft gray, tipped with a trace of blue. It catches the wind and dances just out of reach, swirling down the hillside and disappearing into the tall grass. You follow. Below the ridge, the terrain changes once again. It always does. The island feels alive that way, like it shifts its skin just when you think you understand it. Down here, the land is denser, thornier. Acacia-like bushes crowd the path, and the air pulses with the droning hum of insects you'll never see but definitely feel. You duck beneath a low branch and enter what can only be described as an amphitheater of stone and sun. A natural bowl carved into the land, its edges wrapped in gnarled trees and craggy boulders. In the center, bones. They're not fresh. They're not even intact. Just scattered fragments, fossil gray and dappled with moss. A beak tip. A femur. Maybe a shattered pelvis. You crouch beside them, careful not to disturb the layout. And suddenly, This doesn't feel like random decay. It feels arranged. Like something brought these pieces here. A burial site. A scavenger's cache. Or just the slow choreography of wind and gravity. You don't know. But the stillness around you deepens. Here's your mainstream science fact. Actual dodo fossils are exceedingly rare. Most of what we know comes from a single site, the Mauritius swamp, discovered in the 19th century. That bog, rich in ancient peat, preserved a treasure trove of bones, all jumbled in thick, oxygen-poor muck. But what caused that mass deposition remains unclear. Some say a flood drowned a flock. Others point to seasonal die-offs or predators cornering them. But the truth? It's murky. The kind of mystery that invites stories more than answers. So here's your quirky detail. Early colonial records mention a dodo graveyard, known only to locals, a place where the birds were rumored to gather when sick or dying. No such location has ever been confirmed, but in folklore, it became a kind of avian elephant's graveyard, a mythic spot of final rest. And now here you are, standing in what could be just that. Or not. The mind fills in gaps, especially when the gaps are shaped like something sacred. You imagine a lone dodo limping into this place, driven by instinct or memory. Nestling among its ancestors, not out of fear, but completion. A soft rustle behind you. You spin. And there it is again, another dodo. This one younger, sleeker, its feathers darker, beak glossier. It watches you with what could generously be called interest, or suspicion. Or mild amusement, like a pigeon sizing up your sandwich. It steps forward, head tilting. Then another step. You hold your breath. And that's when your humor moment sneaks in like a punchline at a funeral. The bird walks right up to the scattered bones, pecks once at a femur, then casually sits on it. Like it's a warm rock. A throne. A statement, yes, this belonged to my great-great-grand beak. I nap where I please. You exhale, the tension dissolving like mist. But you're not alone anymore. The younger bird gives a low crunk, a sound halfway between a coo and a hiccup. From the trees above, something stirs. Then more of them appear. 3, 5, a dozen. Dodos in varied sizes and hues, descending from ledges and bushes and hidden alcoves. One flaps awkwardly, overshooting a landing and tumbling into a bush, emerging with a leaf stuck on its head like a hat. It wears the accessory with no shame. They gather around the bones, not fearfully, not reverently, just peacefully. Like this is a known place. A common memory. And that's the mystery no one's resolved. How much memory do dodos pass down? Scientists still debate it. Some say the birds lacked any significant learned behavior, calling them instinct-driven and simple. But others point to species with similar island adaptations, like New Caledonian crows or Kia parrots, which display complex problem-solving, even rudimentary tool use. What if the dodo had a social intelligence we never saw? What if they taught each other? Shared routes. Knew where to find shelter after cyclones or which fruits fermented too quickly. We missed the chance to find out. But watching them now, weaving around ancient bones, it doesn't feel like you're watching simple creatures. It feels like you're watching a memory pass between feathers. A gust of wind rises, lifting dust from the clearing and wrapping it around the dodos like a veil. For a moment, they vanish into that swirling haze, shadows dancing in fog. And when it clears, they're moving again. Not away, but around you. Circling. One brushes your leg with its wing. Another leans in so close you can count the tiny scratches on its beak. You don't breathe. You're afraid to. And that's when one of them, let's call her the hat wearer, does something completely unexpected. She plucks a fallen leaf, waddles over, and drops it in your lap. Gift? Joke? Prank? You laugh softly. It feels like the right answer to all three. And just like that, the moment fades. The birds shuffle off, one by one, vanishing into the shadows they emerged from. You're left with the bones. And something like awe. Not because of what they were, but because of how little we ever knew them. And how much, in a single afternoon, you've come to care. The sun dips lower, casting the amphitheater in long amber light. Time to move. But now you carry something more than curiosity. You carry a question. If a species dies, but its memory lingers, not in textbooks, but in the shape of forests and the rustle of wind and the gifts of birds long gone, is it truly extinct? You rise and walk toward the thinning light, brushing the leaf gift once more. You follow a narrow stream now, its banks tangled with roots like veins pushing through skin. The water sings, a quiet, silvery murmur that threads between stones smoothed by time and footsteps, perhaps dodo feet once, back when the stream was deeper, colder, braver. You dip your fingers in. It's warm. The terrain begins to level out again, and what opens before you is startling in its contrast. A coastal plain, brushed with golden grasses and punctuated by squat palms with fronds that seem too big for their trunks. The sea glitters on the horizon, a band of molten blue beneath a lowering sun. But your eye catches something closer, scattered impressions in the soil. Not fossilized, not ancient. Just recent enough to still hold shape. 3 toes, wide and splayed, repeated in a winding pattern toward the dunes. You know those prints. The beak wasn't the dodo's only mystery. But today, it's the one you've been chasing. And here, on this sun-washed shore, its purpose finally begins to take form. Here's your scientific fact. The dodo's beak was disproportionately large for its body, curved, powerful, and sharp-edged, more akin to a raptor's than a pigeon's. For centuries, scientists assumed it was simply a fruit crusher, ideal for Mauritius' now vanished ebony forests and calvaria trees. But new biomechanical studies suggest something else. The beak was overbuilt for fruit alone. It could crack seeds the size of walnuts. It could sever plant stems like scissors. Some even suggest it was a deterrent, used in territorial displays or mild combat between rival dodos. And then there's the curious case of the dodo's lesser-known diet. You arrive at the edge of a collapsed palm and stop dead. Inside the husk of its fallen crown, amid pulp and bugs, are fragments of shell, eggshell. Not dodo. Reptilian. Now, you've wandered deep into the weird zone. One quirky historical detail comes to mind. 17th century sailors wrote accounts of dodos stealing and eating seabird eggs. One Dutch journal even accused them of seeking the unguarded nests of ground fowl and devouring the contents like hungry foxes. That beak, it wasn't just for fruit. It might have been a tool of quiet theft. A little drama in paradise. You glance around. The air here smells salter, crisper. You feel eyes on you, not dodo this time. Black dots will overhead. Tropic birds, maybe. Silent, suspicious judges of the land bound. And here's where the story tilts into a mystery again. Scientists still debate what else the dodo ate. Some theorize it scavenged, taking carrion scraps or even small lizards. Others suggest it had a highly varied diet, one that allowed it to thrive in a range of habitats, from coastal dunes to mountain forests. That beak might have been the secret to its success. Or, ironically, its undoing. Because when the Dutch arrived, they brought goats, rats, pigs. All of them excellent at two things, eating eggs and outcompeting native herbivores. Suddenly, the dodo's buffet vanished. Its carefully evolved tools, beak included, no longer had a use. It's like bringing a beautifully carved key to a door that's been bricked up. You kneel beside the palm. There's something intimate in the shape of the nest, even in its disarray. A shallow cup of pressed grass and grit, as if made by a bird too big to build delicately but determined to try anyway. You smile. Because it's funny, in that bittersweet way. A bird as clumsy as the dodo probably made some awkward nests. Maybe even failed ones. You picture a dodo waddling proudly away from its lopsided construction, feathers puffed, only to have it collapse in a stiff breeze. And then, starting over. That's the humor in it. The life in it. Even extinction doesn't erase those little domestic absurdities. You rise again, following the last of the footprints toward the sea. The grasses part around you, waving like they're whispering. You imagine the scene long ago, dodos striding this path at dawn, beaks glinting, heads bobbing with a rhythm known only to them. Some walked alone. Some in pairs. Maybe families. Maybe rival flocks who squawked and puffed and chased each other through this same golden stretch. And maybe, just maybe, one dodo stopped where you're standing now, overlooking the shallows, and stared out at the horizon, wondering if there was more out there than fruit and eggs and sun. And you know what? There probably was. The sun touches the ocean now, fire melting into sapphire. Everything gets quieter. Even the wind stops to listen. And in that pause, you feel it. Not loss. Legacy. Because here's the last secret the beak might have held: versatility. Adaptation. Resilience. Yes, it could crack seeds. Yes, it could raid nests. But it could also defend, preen, poke, display. It was a tool not of one purpose, but many. Just like the dodo itself, more than a punchline, more than a cautionary tale. A creature of layered instinct and evolving identity. You turn from the sea, the final light behind you casting your shadow long and odd, like a dodo silhouette stretched by memory. And for a fleeting second, you swear your shadow has a beak. The evening deepens, and the ocean pulls a silk veil over its shimmer. You walk now with slower steps, the earth underfoot cooled and hushed. Crickets begin their sleepy chorus, and somewhere, far off, a tree shakes as if something large once brushed past, though nothing moves now. You follow the inland path, one worn thin not by modern feet, but by time. At the crest of a hill, you pause. Below you sprawls a shallow basin, dappled with ferns and low shrubs. And there, framed in the last hues of twilight, stands the fossilized remains of a tree, dead for centuries, bark stripped by wind, hollowed by insects, but rooted all the same. This is where history whispers loudest. Not in books or bones, but in place. Here's a grounded scientific fact. Dodos nested on the ground, likely laying just one egg at a time. This made them incredibly vulnerable, not just to predators introduced by humans, but to environmental change. A storm, a drought, a season of spoiled fruit, any of these could have spelled disaster for a species already living on reproductive knife's edge. And when rats and pigs arrived, one egg per season wasn't enough to compete. Now here's something quirkier. When scientists tried to reforest parts of Mauritius in the 1970s, they discovered that certain native trees, like the Tambler Coke, sometimes called the dodo tree, had stopped reproducing. One theory, partly debunked, but still deliciously persistent, was that the seeds of these trees needed to pass through the gut of a dodo to germinate. Imagine that. A bird vanishes, and trees go silent. It turned out the relationship was more complex, and other animals could scarify the seeds too, but still, the idea lingered that something as mighty as a tree might depend on the daily wandering of a flightless bird with a goofy walk and a legendary beak. Which brings us to the bigger mystery. Did we misunderstand the dodo entirely? Scientists still debate just how dumb the dodo really was. Early descriptions painted it as foolish, clumsy, fearless to a fault. But later analyses of skull size and brain structure suggest otherwise. The dodo may have had intelligence comparable to modern pigeons, birds capable of recognizing faces, solving puzzles, even riding trains in Tokyo if you give them a few weeks to figure it out. What if the dodo wasn't oblivious, just unafraid? What if its downfall wasn't stupidity, but trust? You imagine a dodo waddling toward a sailor in 1602, curious about the odd, hairless creature offering fruit, not realizing that this hand held more than food. It held the beginning of an ending. And maybe the dodo stood there, blinking slowly, waiting for the world to make sense again. A humor creeps in here, soft, dry, like a leaf curled in sun. You picture a dodo stubbornly pecking at a coconut it has no hope of cracking, then squawking angrily at the sky as if blaming the weather for its hard day. Or one sitting squarely on a rock, refusing to move because it has declared, silently, that this is its rock now. You smile. The thought is ridiculous, and totally believable. That's the thing about extinction. It steals the details. The odd behaviors. The private habits. All we're left with is guesswork and old bones. But tonight, here in this glade, lit only by moonrise and memory, you get a flicker of the real animal. You sit beside the fossil tree, running your fingers along the ridged bark. You can almost hear the shuffle of feathers in the dark. Almost feel the warmth of a round, soft body settling nearby for the night. If you stay quiet enough, long enough, maybe you'll hear the rasp of a heavy beak slicing through fruit rind. Or the flutter-pad of feet disturbing fallen leaves. Maybe even a sound that's never been recorded, never written down. The dodo's call. What did it sound like? Was it a croak? A warble? A soft, booming coo? We don't know. And that's the heartbreak, wrapped in gentle comedy, that we never will. The dodo sang its song into a world that wasn't listening. You glance up. The stars are brighter now, blinking like they've been waiting for you to look. And suddenly, the island doesn't feel so small. It feels like the center of a forgotten universe. One where birds ruled without flight. Where beaks were passports to survival. Where extinction was a slow, confused slipping, not a single moment. This wasn't a species that collapsed in a dramatic blaze. The dodo faded. Quietly. Incrementally. Disappearing not just from forests, but from memory. Until one day, someone asked, "Wait, what happened to those big birds?" And the silence answered back. You lie on your back now, grass cool against your arms, eyes full of stars. And in that vast, soft dark, you realize, the dodo's real story isn't just about what it lost. It's about what it tried to hold on to. Night deepens to its richest shade, and the island stills in a hush that feels older than time. You sit in the long grass now, no longer walking, no longer searching. The air has cooled, but the earth beneath you holds the last warmth of the day, like a secret cupped in the island's hand. The dodo's story has nearly been told, and yet, it feels as though you've only begun to understand it. Across the clearing, you see a low stone, weathered, moss-laced, perhaps once part of a boundary wall from a long-gone settlement. You picture a Dutch settler resting there, watching the birds shuffle through the underbrush. Maybe he tossed a rind or crust to one. Maybe he laughed at the bird's peculiar gait. Maybe he never imagined that his idle afternoon would be part of a much larger undoing. You can't help but think, extinction didn't arrive like a storm. It crept in like dusk. Familiar, slow, and irreversible. Let's bring in a final scientific fact, an elegant one. DNA analysis of dodo bones has confirmed its closest living relative is the Nicobar pigeon, a sleek, iridescent creature found in Southeast Asia. Not a giant, not flightless, not even remotely clumsy-looking. Just a humble cousin, living quietly on scattered islands, as if keeping vigil for the family line. And here's a strange, almost poetic twist. The Nicobar pigeon, despite its beauty, is now considered near-threatened. As if history, ever theatrical, is hinting at a sequel. A quiet reminder that extinction is not a tale we tell once. Let's fold in a charming, human oddity. In 1896, a British schoolmaster named Edwin Gledall swore he'd seen a dodo alive in a Mauritian forest. He even sent a letter to the press. Of course, it was never confirmed, likely a misidentification, or perhaps wishful thinking laced with gin. Still, for a moment, the world believed again. Hoped again. That's the thing with vanished creatures. We keep wanting them back. And here's the final mystery. Why do we care so deeply about a bird we never knew? Scientists still debate what the dodo really symbolizes. Is it a cautionary tale? A punchline? A tragic accident of biology and geography? Or something more personal? Maybe the dodo reminds us of our own blind spots. Our tendency to miss value in things that don't impress us at first glance. After all, the dodo wasn't fast, it wasn't fierce, it didn't fly, it just was. Perfectly suited to its world. Until that world changed. You imagine walking alongside one now, as it clambers over a root, pauses to peer up at you with a beady, unblinking eye. Not stupid. Just curious. You might be the first human it's ever seen. And it might be the last dodo you ever meet. You chuckle, softly. Picture the bird tripping over its own toes, recovering with a huff, and pretending it meant to do that. There's something stubbornly endearing about the dodo. It was never built for escape or battle. It was built for stillness. For a life without predators. For slow mornings and soft fruit. Maybe, in a way, it was too peaceful for the world we dragged it into. You lie back once more, fingers laced behind your head. Somewhere nearby, the waves breathe against the shore. A steady, lulling rhythm. And for a heartbeat, you imagine the dodo world not as extinct, but simply hidden. Tucked behind the veil of time, waiting for someone to remember it with enough clarity that it briefly flickers back to life. In dreams, perhaps, the birds still walk. And in those dreams, their beaks gleam in the sun, not just for cracking fruit, but for breaking open the shell of the world itself. And now, your journey winds to a close. The stars have tilted ever so slightly, like they've drifted with you across time. The island fades behind your eyes, but its rhythm lingers, in the sway of branches, in the rustle of feathers you can almost still hear. The story of the dodo remains, not as a fading echo, but as something gently stitched into your thoughts now. like a feather caught in your collar. You rest more easily, knowing not everything must be dramatic to matter. That even a soft, silent vanishing can teach us something lasting. The dodo didn't roar. It didn't fight. It simply lived until it couldn't anymore. And still, it left behind a shape in the world. A space only it could fill. Let that shape stay with you, as a reminder of slowness, of stillness, of small, irreplaceable wonders. Let your breath settle into the rhythm of the waves you imagined, steady and slow. Let your mind drift to the scent of warm fruit, the whisper of leaves under footless trees, the imagined touch of a beak tapping gently on your shoe. All those tiny details your mind built tonight, carry them with you, into sleep, or wherever this quiet takes you next. No rush to leave. You're already there.